Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on your Thursday afternoon for our conversation today. We're going to be breaking it down how 5G and edge computing can help you, what it means for you and your business, and what you need to be aware of. My name is Joshua Ness, and I'm a senior manager at Verizon 5G Labs. We're excited to host this discussion as part of our 5G Labs virtual event series. For those of you who aren't familiar with Verizon 5G Labs, we work with startups, academia, and enterprise teams to build a 5G powered world using the practical applications of emerging technologies. And part of that mission includes having conversations like this that create opportunities for communities to thrive and grow in the presence of those new technologies. Now, if you're interested in learning more about our work, you can visit verizon5glabs.com. We'd also like to thank Allie for partnering with us to help make this event happen. Allie is a community agency that unites rich and diverse communities around the country with corporate partners to provide the resources and catalysts to drive positive change in technology and in the broader world. And without further ado, I want to turn it over to our incredible group of participants who are with us today. If we could do like a 1 minute or so introduction. Faye, who are you and what are we doing here today?
Hi, thank you for having me, Faye Orjomandi. I'm the founder and CEO of Mimic. Before that, I was the CEO of a group of companies under Nant Mobile, where we led the consumerization of healthcare. Before that, I was the CEO of Vodafone Zone, the global venture incubation and beta brand for Vodafone. And before that, I was the founder and C-level executives in a couple of other companies, Mobilia, where we sold to App Annie in 2014, and before that, L3 Technology. I'm an electrical engineering degree and alumni of Concordia University in Montreal. Thanks for having me here.
Nice, yeah, thanks for being here. Valerie, why don't you take us away next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Valerie Clark, and I work with IBM. I've been with IBM about 18 years. Most of my career was in financial services in various roles. And about 3 years ago, I joined our industrial markets team, really to work with our cross group of collaborators on launching our edge computing and services business. That meant developing offerings for markets that we felt were ripe for transformation, and working alongside, my colleagues in the ecosystem team to ensure that we identified the right partners to join us. So I'm really excited to be here today. And recently I did move over to that ecosystem team more formally. Very happy to have Faye as a partner, which we found on this. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. That's some serendipity right there. Indrani, where are you coming from and what are you working on?
Yes, hi, I'm Indrani. I am part of the CTO organization. I run an innovation and realization team, and we are focused on leveraging all the great emerging technologies in the market, working with startups, great partners, and kind of building an ecosystem of solutions that we can bring to our customers and solve problems, provide experiences. We've been developing a lot of solutions on MEC and 5G, so we are really excited about this conversation and to build further this ecosystem. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, we are happy to have you here. I got to tell you, I feel thoroughly outgunned with this amazing panel here. I hope you, all 177 or so of you who are currently watching are strapped into your seats because we are going for a wild ride on this topic of technology. Before we kick things off, for those of you in the audience, please make sure to drop your questions in the Q&A feature. We'll be monitoring that throughout the talk because we won't have a formal Q&A session afterward. So real quick, before we get started, I wanted to clear up a couple of terms that you've probably heard thrown around already. 5G it's the next generation, the fifth generation of wireless connectivity. And it really builds on top of what we've done up to this point with 4G and LTE from a foundational level. It uses different airwaves, it uses different backend systems, and it presents a monumental shift in the way that we think about connectivity in the type of volume and bandwidth of data that it can handle. Also, there is the reduced latency, and I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And so, by many accounts, it might be tempting to say that 5G is just faster internet. when in fact what it's really going to do is wake up and enable a lot of other types of technologies, which will then make it more crucial in return. And so one of those is something that's called edge or edge computing, or MEC, which stands for multi-access edge computing. And it's generally the idea, and I'm sure everyone on the panel is going to groan when I say this, it's generally the idea that you can take the cloud, which is located sometimes very, very far away, and bring it close to the user. And what that does is reduces latency for the travel time that it takes data to move back and forth, and it actually allows you to host some things within the network itself without that signal having to go out into the open internet to retrieve content, to do compute, to do render graphics and things like that. And so that's kind of a foundation of what we're going to be talking about here moving forward. If you're not familiar with any of those terms, I recommend giving them a Google as we get started here. And so, Faye, I wanted to talk to you for just a second. As we're talking about things like 5G and Edge, how do you see these technologies starting to deliver advanced connectivity around the world? And how's your work at Mimic plugging into that new ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So perhaps I can start from the definition point of view and being on the same level. Hybrid Edge Cloud, Mimic is a hybrid edge cloud application development platform company, and hybrid edge cloud, from our point of view, is formed by a seamless combination of two categories of computing resource. One are the servers that are in the data center today, and the way that developers or enterprises are utilizing that is by hosting the backend services there, where you can send data to be processed. And then the second element, which is the new element, is basically computing-rich edge devices. And that is, when we talk about computing-rich edge devices, that is the phone that can be a robot arm, and that can be pretty much a smart TV. So pretty much anything, and as well as a base station, a telco base station. So pretty much anything outside the data center that has CPU, memory, compute, connectivity, and a form of operating system that runs a client agent is an edge device. And that is where the data source is, right? That is where really the data starts. The devices, applications are starting with producing a lot of data there. Therefore, the demand for computational ability, or for computing data, translating data to information, for processing a workload on these devices rising. And that's where basically where Mimic plays, because we're providing this application development environment that you can now develop your applications in a standard cloud-based architecture, meaning RESTful API and microservice-driven architecture, starting from the device itself. And that's where basically the 5G role is as well, because 5G is providing us with higher bandwidth and faster data transmission. And in order to provide, basically enable a real performance in the application, now I have an application that runs on this device, and the processing capability of data is happening here, but at the same time, the application can instantiate a workload on the base station, because now base station is providing additional resource that can help the application to process for their data or for their workload, which means that you don't have to always go to cloud, to today's cloud. You go when you need it, and that's the benefit that Edge actually provides to 5G, because otherwise you have a fast tactile communication between the device and base station. But if the data requires to go all the way back to cloud, then you miss the opportunity, and it defeats the purpose of a speed that you gain from 5G.
Mm-hmm. It opens up additional security elements as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, the benefits are it provide enterprises and application developers much higher basically performance, more data security, more data privacy, because now you can this entire notion of transitioning from or transferring a non-structured data to a structured data in the data center, it gets eliminated because you can literally tag and label the data on application on device, and you can send it to the different destination based on the data privacy. And given everything is now RESTful API and microservices, you have much, much higher scalability. You have more interoperability because everything is API based. And it allows a much more systematic this notion of digital transformation, because now you have the agility to add capability as you go forward to the ultimate solution and to meet the evolving demand of digital solutions, right? Because digital solutions are not going to be, you're not going to develop one solution and that's it forever. You have to keep adding intelligence, you have to keep adding automation, and you have to provide this capability that devices can now discover each other and applications can communicate in more direct way, right? Because that's a transition that we're going through. We're transitioning from mobile internet to hyper-connected world, which means that mobile connects to internet to consume content. In hyper-connected world, digital intersects with every physical aspect of our life, which means that digital is going to be around me. And I have all these devices, all these applications that need to mimic the physical interaction, right? They should not constantly go to cloud and back. They can now interact with each other and share knowledge with each other in order to drive to this dream of full automation and AI-driven world, right?
Yeah. Val, I imagine that you and IBM have an opinion on living in a hyper-connected world. You kind of have some skin in that game. What are your thoughts on advanced connectivity like 5G and Edge, and what does it mean for your work at IBM?
That's a great question. Yes, it is very much something we care about, right? And I think I did promise some friends that I was going to make this super simple for them, right? So I'm just going to start off, say edge computing isn't new. It's been around for a long, long time, right? It's just distributed computing. But what changed, right? What got us all excited and working on strategic plans? And it's really the progression of 5G. And if we look back in history, you see with every single telco advancement from 2G to 3G to 4G, there was a major step change shift in innovation, like the internet coming with 3G, like smartphones with 4G, right? So it behooved us to put our thinking caps on and get with our industry experts and really think about reimagining what we could do in this world and for our industries with that super, super low latency, super high broadband, ultra reliable connection, right? So I think Faye did a really good job of talking about how we're moving workloads to the source of where data is created. Think about what we've been talking about at IBM for 20 years, big data, and all the issues of managing that big data and securitizing it and ethics around it, right? It's flipped the coin. Now we just take the workload and we put it to where the data is. We do that when we have a use case or a business outcome that we want to achieve that really requires real-time insights. And so when might that be? When you want to automate. You want to automate, right? Automate a process or an intelligent workflow is the term we've coined that I absolutely love, right? And as Faye talked about, multiple applications or workloads can now communicate with one another. It's enabling us to advance on federated AI learning. Do you know how awesome that is? It used to take forever to train these AI models. Now they're sitting down there, they're reading the data, and then we just send them back to the cloud. We'll pull them all together, can learn about entire mini microservices of AI that have occurred across a chain, master model, recuration, and then redistribute those workloads. These things weren't possible before, and they are possible now, which I think is really exciting. We are completely reimagining what we can do for industries based on this. And you brought up the MEC, and I'm just going to be honest and tell you, I came at this from an AI data kind of perspective. It took me a little while to understand the MEC, to be honest with you. And, you go, oh, I guess I got to ask that question. So how it really resonated with me is, well, really when I'm doing my go-to-market, right? I'm trying to sell some of these edge solutions, and you've got to buy a server, and you got to buy devices, and all these things. So then we do our ROM, and then do the ROI, and it's like, oh, it's really expensive to buy all that infrastructure to distribute it to the edge, right? So what we found, and actually it was working with Verizon, we did a proof of technology where we stood up our software in a Verizon mech. We got a camera, a static camera where we were able to, pull in the images, and we demonstrated in 10 days. Yes, it took 10 days to do this POC. We demonstrated that we could have images from the camera flow through the 5G mech of Verizon, and then for the analytics to compute to detect if people aren't wearing face masks, or they're not social distancing, or they're in a no-go zone, right? And then the data flowed to the IBM cloud, right, where we had our base solution running, and our Verizon colleagues had their iPhone, and they could just see the results right there on the iPhone, and it all happened instantaneously. That's when the light bulb went on with me. We are virtualizing all that infrastructure in the Mac, and I think that's really important right now because supply chains are a little impacted. It takes a long time to get equipment shipped, right? So our ability to really advance faster is helped by leveraging our telco colleagues and their Mac concept. Did that simplify it all? I want to stop. I don't want to rattle on too long. Did that simplify?
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think one of the things that I want to make sure that we're clear on is that, and please correct me if I'm wrong or add any flavor, is that 5G and the complementary nature of 5G and Mac is really what is bringing, I'd say, both of these solutions to life. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, and maybe I can jump in. If you think about it, and Faye pointed out to it, what MEC is essentially is intelligent networks. We're improving the performance of the applications, better latency, bandwidth. And what we are doing with 5G is we are able to bring kind of lightning fast speeds. So if you think about lots of data being able to bring back and forth, 5G is helping do that, and then the compute. So it's complementary. One is unlocking the other.
And accelerating their speed to market, quite frankly.
Correct. Yeah, so we are kind of transforming how we're capturing, adding value to data, manipulating data, whether it's video, whether it's a hologram, whether it's, large data sets, whether it's computer vision. We are able to real-time manipulate large data sets to drive, real-time actions and predictions and, automation.
Absolutely, and if I may add to that, exactly as Val and Indrani said, the 5G and edge are two different layers, right? So you have edge computing, which is about workload processing and data processing on where closest proximity to where the data source is, right, and where the application demand is. Then 5G has two aspects. It has the aspects of improving bandwidth and latency and speed. Then the other aspect of 5G is really an IT paradigm, right? And that means that the resource available, Michel Berger, our CTO, and Siavash Alamuti, our executive chairman, they actually led the mobile edge computing for operators when they were both at Vodafone, and they delivered the first architecture for telco. And MEC is about, and Michel always says that when one of the telco vendors said, what can we offer to Vodafone more? He said that put more compute on the base station. Why? Because now I can transfer, I can instantiate a workload there based on the application initiating that request and based on the business logic demand. When Val talked about AI, now imagine that you are training the AI model in global cloud. Then you are pushing the model to the edge devices for applications to use it. Take, for example, a Google Map example. Today, everybody's sending data up to the cloud through the network. Now imagine that now as the devices are reporting their data, their information of location, you have a cluster of communication of cars that they can actually receive each other's location and measure the latency or the distance to the destination. Now, at the same time, the different clusters of car sending the result of each cluster to a base station 5G, that now it can create a shortcut or more computation of this data between those two clusters of car, and then eventually send information back to the global Google map. So you almost have the distribution of functions that it starts from the car as an edge, then it starts in the communication and calculation between these clusters of the car. Then as they attach to the base station, they can communicate across the cluster and do more computation and information sharing, and then eventually go to global knowledge for further processing and enhancement of the decision that can come back to the devices. So yeah.
That's a great example. You piqued my brain. I want to give another one where I think is really, really important. What edge computing or being able to deliver those workloads to where data is also gives us is more privacy as human beings. We don't have to worry about data about us, all that raw data being sent up to some cloud and then computed but where does it really go, right? Instead, the compute is right where we are in space and time. And so the analysis or the analytics are done on it, and the only thing sent back to that cloud is the insight. To me, that's very important when we're starting to look at things like, contact tracing software and all that kind of stuff, right? For COVID, I'm creeped out about that. I don't want to be tracked, right? But if someone can tell me, we don't touch your data, we perish it, we let it go, we don't want to transfer it over the network, that's expensive, we just let it go, but we just sent that insight back up, so now I know that you were in contact with someone with COVID, right? That's helpful to me, right? But I need that assurance. And so I think a really important point is about the importance of stewardship, right? And ethical programs, ethical statements to our markets about how we're going to treat data. I think that's really essential because there is a lot of power in edge computing and our ability to drive those workloads down.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to take the time from the panel, but in that example of contact tracing, Val, you're absolutely right. In fact, I presented to the Canadian House of Commons on that data privacy aspect of contact tracing, because I think contact tracing is a feature that is necessary for us. But if done properly, not through addition to operating system that we don't know what's happening, but in fact, that was one of the things that we offered, because with Mimic, devices can discover each other based on being on the same network or proximity, which means that information as an application, the key of which devices were around me, can be shared amongst devices without even going to the cloud. And that's a key that doesn't come back to the end user information. And now if someone gets notification that, hey, I had a lab exam and it's negative or it's positive, now if they initiate an alert, the alert goes to all the key members that were in the proximity or in the network, and that alert doesn't say that this came from Faye or Jumandi. That alert says someone within your proximity was got COVID and you need to check with your healthcare provider. So, and in that case, you have information completely private on device, and as you said, some information on global side.
Yeah, as we're thinking about, and thank you for that, Faye and Valerie and Indrani, as we're thinking about these different types of use cases, which we've started to touch on, I'm curious, Indrani, where are we seeing these use cases being implemented? What industries are we seeing that are early adopters of 5G and Edge, and why these industries over others?
Yeah, no, so that's a really important question. So we are seeing a lot of use cases in the in enterprises, whether you talk about smart factory or safe factory or factory of the future. You're seeing, especially with COVID, what is driving it is hey, I want to minimize the exposure in the factory floor. I want less people there. So how do I drive more automation? How do I drive more, robots? And for the robot, like I need a digital twin of this factory so that the robot is not going to go hit somebody or something. So there needs to be very, very, real time decisioning that needs to happen. So we are seeing that. Factory keeping safety, whether it's remote assistant into the factory. How do I fix something? Or you have training, with VR glasses, VR headsets in there to drive some, maintenance and things like that. So we are seeing a lot of factory of the future type of use cases. The other one is education. So, with COVID, education got impacted. So we are seeing a lot of universities asking, how do I make, hold on just a second. Alexa, stop. Sorry, my Alexa was going crazy. So we are seeing in the universities, we are seeing a lot of kind of how do I bring a professor in their hologram coming and giving the lecture, and in the students' homes, or doing back and forth conversations. We are seeing in kind of a surgery training, right? How do I replicate a big hologram and have doctors be able to like practicing on the hologram as to exact where something is happening? Or even when we launched MEC, one of the examples we had with a partner was, how do I let doctors in 3D in a hologram and be able to really pinpoint where they have to go and surgically take some actions in real time. This has to be real time. So education, healthcare, factory of the future, and the one that they mentioned, like that we're starting to see and will become really big, is like vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure. How do you make it more safe? How do you make traffic flow patterns better? So those are some of the interesting ones that we are seeing. And not to leave consumers behind, like we launched a product called AR Pro, AR Athlete Pro. So you have Ray Allen, hologram of Ray Allen in your living room doing his 3-point shot, and this golf swing or a tennis swing. So even with consumers, we're trying to bring these experiences to life where a lot of data needs to get manipulated, and 5G is making that happen. So across the board, we are seeing, COVID has been a really kind of giving it a push. And we're seeing a lot of innovation, and people, the companies, the innovation teams in these companies thinking, how can I drive this digital transformation? And, Josh, some of the programs you're leading in your labs, you're having these startup partners come in and say, how I can change with robotics, what can I do, how can I leverage 5G and MEC, and all these things that are coming out of the labs, whether it's gaming, whether it's robotics, whether it's things around healthcare, is really driving the ecosystem and kind of showing the art of possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting to have something like Edge in our arsenal that we're able to offer up to innovators. And I wanted to follow up with you real quick, Andrani. Like, what does it mean? We've talked about so far just now all of the different things that we're putting up there into market that where we have established use cases for, but what does it mean for developers? What are some of the benefits that developers can be thinking about as they're trying to come up with new types of innovations and new types of products and services, new proofs of concept? Yeah. And where does Edge fit into that? And where there was even a question here in the Q&A just a second ago about what are the software development considerations for creating 5G and Edge applications? Like what are those folks who are out there hacking away? What do they need to know?
What they need to know, and some of these points were hit by both Valerie and Faye, is that with Edge, you can bring things really close to the consumers where it's going to get consumed. You are taking away a lot of the hops to the far cloud and things away. So if I am a gaming developer and I want to have multiplayer games happening and it has really, latency consideration, you're like, how do I leverage the edge and put kind of some sort of inferencing in the edge that will help me. So for game developers, it's like what was not possible because of latency before, and how can I now really, that's not a pain point anymore, that's not a friction point anymore, what can I do? Kind of from a mech edge perspective, like drones, right? Drones are small things, right? There's a limited amount of compute you can put on it, put on that. Now I can say, hey, I can put a lot of the compute on the edge, so the latency is not impacted. However, I can now do serious inventory management in these factory floors. So, hey, drone manufacturers, think about what do you want to push off from your drones into the edge, and what do you want to keep on the drones, and enable your customers to use it. And what that helps is you don't have to do $2,000 drones. You can do a simple, cheap drone, and you can have kind of the more heavy lift compute be on the edge. Other examples is like cashierless checkout, like simple things, right? You don't have to deploy a box in a cashierless checkout where the box can get stolen. You don't have to think about that. You don't have to think about deploying box after box after box. Put it in our Mac edge. And so from a software developer perspective, is the pain points that you were having. So huge data manipulation, I can do it simply, faster, closer to where the customer has to experience it. So think about what are some of the pain points you have, friction points you have, where connectivity today is not supporting you enough, whether it's Wi-Fi or 4G, and you need a 5G there. And where the compute cannot be in the cloud, where cost is too much to send that much data back and forth, or latency is an issue where time becomes a thing. So I want to bring it closer. So think about those two. How do I marry those two, and how does that solve the pain points I have, whether I'm a game developer, whether I am somebody wants to do things around education and training, if I want to build a robotic solution or a drone solution. So that's how I would think about it.
Yeah, and if I add on that, actually, these are great examples. So first of all, I mean, for developers, you're targeting at least on our side, we believe in microservice development and RESTful API. So microservice developers know how to develop microservices, except that now that can exist on this device as well. So we have, for example, customers today that they develop, it's a fintech company, that tax calculation is done traditionally in cloud, but now they actually do the tax calculation as a microservice on device, which means that faster experience for customer, lower cost of cloud. Gaming, a gaming company that now can do staged analytics on device, and then at the same time, the game can instantiate a local lobby on its own operating system and invite friends into it. The key is that this is the same way that we had cloud native developers. We're gonna start seeing hybrid edge cloud native developers. Cloud native developers are with API, RESTful API first and microservice driven architecture. This is exactly the same thing, microservice driven architecture and RESTful API developers. And the key thing is that we should not treat edge or even 5G as a deployment exercise. Deployment comes as a next phase, because there's a lot of activity in the market that they just say, hey, here is a DevOps tool that now you can instantiate something here versus there. But it's actually an application development methodology, and deployment comes as next level. And similarly, like imagine the example where you have a motion sensor in a smart home system. Detects an intrusion, because the moment somebody comes inside home, an intrusion is detected. That intrusion initiates a flag to the smart camera. The smart camera already has the facial, a model of the members of this residence. If it doesn't recognize it, it can send a flag to now customer who's outside the home to validate whether this person is allowed to come in or not. If the person, and that can be done through 5G network. If the person says, no, I don't recognize this person, that camera can now initiate the face that it captures to the CCTV cameras of the city. And immediately the CCTV camera can start following the person and look for that face in the neighborhood, and then it starts sending flag to the law enforcement. So it's about collaboration in a smaller cluster of communication, and 5G more as a radio network, or let me give me more resource because I want to do more recognition.
Do you mind if I just add a little something to this? I know we've gone on quite a bit for the whole part. So I was talking earlier, and I said we used to be all worried about the big data and getting the data up to the cloud and how to make it secure. And oh, wow, it costs a lot to send all that. And now we said, wait, we can get benefits with real-time insights because of the links, right? So now we're just going to move the workloads down to where the data is. You don't have to save all that data, persist all that data, the benefits to privacy and all that. Okay, so what has shifted? Now we have to worry about managing the workloads. So containerizing workloads, right, so that they can operate with all of the variability out there across different clouds. Because if you're building a product, right, you need to be able to operate in a hybrid mode. Faye and Indrani both talked about devices. The critical skill set that we've addressed and see, and is why consulting is very, I really believe it's a services-led journey to these edge things, right? So huge opportunity out there for you developers to build your skill set, but it's kind of like mechanical engineering, understanding the balance between the microservices and the devices, their CPU usage, their connectivity, right? You want to, for an offering that you build for the market, you need to have your full reference architecture stacked out, but that offering is not going to be very successful if you can't swap out a component for a different partner along the way. So you need a lab that you can work in to test those things out. And finally, there's a group, it's called Open Horizons. It's an open source community, and it's all about managing those workloads, right? Policy-based architecture. So highly, highly recommend you go check out Open Horizons because you're going to start building that ecosystem. But go on.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've seen that in Verizon as well, and I think Indrani can probably corroborate this, is that there's a need for carriers specifically and other providers to be ecosystem orchestrators, because interoperability is going to be key, because now these enterprise customers have options, and they want to know where different options plug in to give them the best results, because it's not always necessarily from one singular provider. And so building interoperability into those solutions is going to become crucial.
Joshua, I'm sorry, if I may touch on interoperability, because that's actually a key element. And that's why we're constantly pushing RESTful API, microservice-driven architecture. And that's what our Edge engine pretty much enables, that containerization across all platforms and works even with Docker. And that RESTful API and microservice-driven architecture was something that enabled us to integrate with Open Horizon very quickly, right? Because now the application on an iOS can send data to an Android directly. Oh, we lost Val. Can send data to Android directly. Can go over any network, and can go and communicate across any cloud provider. So as long as, and this is what made cloud and cloud native people are so strong on RESTful API and microservice-driven architecture, as long as we can build that, and to Val's point, I think his connection went down, as long as developers continue building their skill set with RESTful API, microservice-driven architecture, and start with an architecture plan, I think that can be quite successful. And that's a skill that we recommend all developers to follow and learn about. Yeah.
As my office and my team work with developers, we encourage them all the way from the college students that we're talking with, who are running R&D projects as capstones, all the way through to startups that are maybe seed and Series A and beyond funded. is to think beyond what we have now. And it's easy to say, here's what 5G and MEC is going to be doing for the devices that we have now. But the question I think it's been touched on a couple of times is that 5G combined with MEC is going to change the very nature of devices. And this isn't even on the agenda that we wrote up to talk about today, but it's been asked a couple of times in the Q&A, and it's something that I'm very passionate about as well. What does this mean for what devices are going to become when you can offload all of that compute and processing needs off of the devices and into the edge network? And using 5G, you can mimic that performance and in some cases exceed the performance of on-device computation. What does that mean for what devices will become?
Well, devices are continuing. I mean, Moore's law, right? Devices
Yes.
are becoming more powerful, more compute, more memory. So don't think that devices are going to go away. Devices are becoming more powerful. Even sensors are becoming more powerful. And that's the whole thesis, because these applications, I mean, if you're going to have, I don't know, 40 billion connected devices by 2025, can you imagine how many more applications we're going to have on top of these things? And also history has proven that the more bandwidth you throw, the more compute you throw, is traffic also exponentially grow, right? Again, think of the word that everything is digital around us. So devices are going to continue growing in compute, memory, and application demands are going to grow. The thing is that you're starting the decision making from the device. You're starting the application communication amongst the devices. You're utilizing the benefits of computational capability, close proximity of these devices that create the data. It can be a base station. It can be a gateway that I have in my home. It can be an open RAN that is on a factory plant. And then you go to also cloud, and you're kind of sending the overall information to cloud as well. So it's just common sense that as this device is becoming more powerful, you might as well process it right there for privacy, for security, for latency, for a real business automation. Like imagine today, we call it a smart home, but it's really not a smart home that we have. If my temperature, my Nest cannot communicate with my solar panel in order to adjust whatever resources in my home. These are the things that because we are living in, unfortunately, a closed ecosystem world, that everybody wants to build the wall garden, again, in one shape and form, we have to agree that, I mean, if we're truly thinking about automation, we can live in wall garden. Systems need to communicate with each other. That's why when people talk about Internet of Things, we say it's actually about Internet of Systems, because every device runs a client agent or a system by itself.
And Faye, that's why I actually brought up the point about we're actually more secure moving workloads to where the data is instead of moving the data. Because I think there's a lot of fear out there about this interconnected world because they miss that point. Your data has been flowing for decades. We just don't know who's got it and what they're doing with it, right? And there's all these security breaches that you see all the time, right? We can end that now. This is a safer path to go down. So I'm really excited about it. I think it moves us toward a more sustainable, safer world overall, and reduces cybersecurity threat, which is, growing exponentially. So exactly. I hope that makes sense. Anybody's welcome to reach out if you want to talk about that more.
And Joshua, I think the other point I would also make is there will be more proliferation of devices, right? So you'll have more smarter devices. A person will have, like on a factory floor, you'll have, more devices. You have machines. So it's not just like, we're not putting device out of business. We're making them smarter. We're evolving them to the next generation. And what MEC and 5G is doing is, making things that's hard for device to do today, making that simpler or taking them up and pushing them to the next level. So we're interconnecting the drone to the inventory management, to the robot, to the VR headset. So it's more about these devices will do more.
Yeah, it's actually a very good point, Indrani brings to the point to highlights, because you're utilizing the power of device that you have. Like, you imagine you paying $1,000 for a mobile device, and then the first thing you do, you buy cloud to push that data back to cloud. But the content exists on your device. The picture exists on your device. Why wouldn't you be able to just give me a link that I can access that specific content at the time that you give me the permission? That's a private by itself. Or if you think about automation, I mean, if you think about a robot arm, we talk about full automation. And then we start thinking about the vertical context of the application, which is something that definitely we should start thinking about, because that's another thing. It's no longer about vertical application. It's about horizontal systems. But if I'm looking at a factory automation, if a robot is smart enough to detect that is about to go down because of some maintenance issue, that robot arm should be able to send an information to risk management office. That robot should be able to send the information to a scheduling system to say, hey, I'm going down. A scheduling system need to dispatch a manual workforce to come and do my job or to replace me. So that's a full automation. And that's why one of the big things about enterprise and digital transformation is that they need to think beyond just one vertical app. They need to think about horizontal systems. And that's the opportunity for new startups, because now they can start and create solutions that work across these devices and enable a real intelligent workflow, as Val pointed out.
And I think, Josh, the point you also made, I mean, these startups, they need somebody to champion the interoperability. So, companies like us, IBMs, we should be leading the charge and are in kind of making that all of this interoperable. So like a small robotics startup cannot, drive the whole ecosystem of robotics companies to do that. So it's really like, from chipsets to devices to, it's the whole ecosystem needs to come together to truly kind of release the power that, the 5G and MEC brings together.
The other reason it really does need to be large, enterprise like that, you've got to get the ethics worked out on this, and it's got to be published to the world, so that if you're going to join this ecosystem, you agree to these standards, right? About use of data, about, we don't do some use cases just because you can, at IBM, you have to go through an ethics board to do an innovation for a client. We have to make sure it's not going to harm the world, right? Yeah. I think that to me is so important, right? Because even as a consumer, things, I'm going to have choices. I keep getting this thing to download this contact tracing. I'm like, no, I don't know you.
Exactly. It's actually another very good point. It starts with epics. What is the storyboard? What do you want to build? Then put it into solution architecture. And again, for the standardization and interoperability, we always have to be careful about how much we standardize. In our opinion, what made cloud is, and especially from 2014, RESTful APIs are what enables interoperability, because you basically standardizing on RESTful API usage, and then how you implement that RESTful API is up to the developers, right? So now if again, going back to contact tracing, I now have a microservice beside my contact tracing application that now when it says, hey, somebody got COVID near you, that microservice with a RESTful API can communicate with my healthcare provider. So versus creating a monstrous global healthcare provider that need to know about everybody, So you now have interoperability right from your application on your device, that microservice on my application is different than that microservice on your application, but the application is still presenting itself in similar fashion, and they each communicate to their own healthcare provider right from the device. And that's one of the things that we see in hybrid. I mean, if you think about what mobile internet did, eliminated the physical middleman. What the hyper-connected world is going to do is going to eliminate the digital middleman, because there are a lot of things that you can do now from that. It's almost like the consumer and producer of service can communicate with each other. Imagine right now you go to Facebook sells your data to advertising. Why can't I, who create that data on my application, communicate with advertising directly? Why should things go through an aggregator? So these are the kind of things that creates tremendous business opportunity, sustainable digital economy with data privacy first approach.
Yeah, I think I think we've extolled all these benefits of interoperability of vendors and partners, of hardware, of software. We've talked about security. Val, one thing I wanted to ask you, and this is timely that Peter in the audience just asked this question. What is going to be the tipping point? Like, what is it that we're seeing that people, potential customers, at least on the enterprise side, where they care the most about, and how will that translate to consumer? What do they care about, to where they're going to expect things like this, and to where developers are going to have no choice but to be building for edge as they build their applications?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I always say, we're IBM, we can do anything, but what should we do, right? And it really comes down to thinking about business, right? Businesses don't do things to be nice. They do things to make money or to save money. And that's it. Or de-risk. That's the third one. Those three things every CEO will tell you. Grow my top line, reduce my bottom line, or reduce my risk. So there are some industries that have a natural affinity or strategy toward progress. One is the manufacturing industry, right? On the journey from Industry 1.0 to 4.0, gosh, it really just mimics telco actually in the evolution, right? So we are at a tipping point there. And so we put a lot of focus on industrial markets. And then it's funny, then the whole world shifted, and we realized not only is it because we can do it and they're going to save money and increase throughput, but we need to do it because we need to be more resilient. We need to be able to take down production lines, put something else on it, and then split back a month later, right, to sustain this world. So that is a key area. Another, and the tipping point. So there's a natural strategy in it. For others, I think, I mean, obviously we've had conditions in our world force us into much more of a remote capability. So I think this is driving a lot, and we're seeing a lot of need. I think actually you spoke to this a little bit in the supply chain and distribution area, right? And that is, again, it's to sustain our world and our health and our viability as countries, right? And the last, really, I think we have tremendous opportunity in the mining industry. Huge push toward, I always said, my mom said, take what you're going to eat, nothing more. We can make some advances now because of our ability to drive compute right onto robots. We can get people out of mines. We can, take only from the ground what we need to take, be much more intelligent about that. And we're seeing we need to do that in order, again, to sustain this world. So I think those are the three areas where we're seeing the tipping points pretty clearly.
I mean, to Val's point, we are in the tipping point. COVID-19 accelerated that tipping point, the demand for digital tremendously, some say by 6 years, some say by 10 years. And what COVID-19 did is that it actually made enterprises realize that web paradigm is not scalable and is not secure. Anybody today that starts with web app or web development of interfaces, they're making a mistake. So this is an opportunity to start developing based on native and microservices. It also proved that it's not secure enough. We're seeing all these tremendous security breaches, right? Shifting compute. And the other thing is that it's not about just yanking your solution out of central cloud and now put it on the on-premise data center. That's a Band-Aid approach. Privacy became so apparent that our data exploitation is killing us. misusing our privacy and selling our soul to in order to get a free picture posted somewhere. So we are in the tipping point. Security breaches on a smart home solution, security breaches on our healthcare information, security breaches on our banking information. So it is a tipping point. As Gartner said, 20% of industry gone through digital journey, 80% are going to start, and that is fast-tracked by COVID-19. So this is an opportunity to start hybrid edge cloud native app application development and create a smarter system, full automation, data privacy and security built into it with massive scalability. And to risk point that Val mentioned, which is critical for enterprises, it's one thing that for consumer to decide, hey, screw it, I'm going to go with one operating system versus another. But imagine an enterprise want to make a choice that forever I'm going to be locked in one ecosystem or locked in one walled garden. That's why this kind of a hybrid edge native development, microservice API everywhere, de-risks their digital transformation tremendously, because as they realize that they need another capability, they can just another microservice and API. One thing we need to push back. We need to push back on walled gardens, and we need to push back on closed ecosystems. We really, as a community, as society, as enterprises, we should not accept walled garden approach and monopolization approach.
Yeah, that's. I think it's going to be super important moving forward. Indrani, to close it out with you as our resident innovator in chief at Verizon, where, assuming that what phase predictions come true, that we're able to remove these walled gardens and we're able to achieve all of this interoperability, like Val was saying, where is advanced going to take society? Sorry, where is advanced connectivity going to lead society in the next 5 years? Knowing that IBM just put Edge on the space station. They kind of showing us up right there. I don't think we have connectivity up there yet, but we're working on it. Where are we going from here?
I think we're going where we're going to make things really simple for enterprises and consumers, right? We are going to make experiences closer to home. We are going to make connectivity, communication simpler, right? What is the next generation of FaceTime? Have a hologram of grandma sitting and reading story time to your granddaughter, right? We're going to make that might sound freaky now, but I'm just the art of possible of making things like traffic smarter and safer, making factories more productive, making communication between families easier and simpler, and just almost democratizing information, right? Like tennis shouldn't be $200 a pop lesson. Anybody should be able to open your smartphone and have Serena Williams give you lessons on how to make the shot. So I feel like technology is going to make things touchable, experiential, all this, like all the sausage making, huge amount of data having to be downloaded, all of that, let's put it, that we'll make that happen. What we're going to bring is make education easier. We're going to make learning easier. We're going to make driving safer. So that's, I think, what's there for society.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. This has been such an amazing conversation. I feel like we all deserve some college credit for participating. Everyone in the audience. Thank you, Valerie, Faye, and Indrani, for this incredible conversation, and a special thank you to everyone in the audience for joining in. There were some amazing questions in the Q&A. Some of them we got to, some of them we didn't. This conversation has been recorded, and it will be available in the next couple of days back at the same site that you used to register, that same page, if anybody would like to share this content with their communities. We are going to be back next week for a session on getting connected, the rise of robotics and cellular connectivity, where we'll touch on entirely connected ecosystems and the way that robotics and IoT functions within those ecosystems. and it's going to be an incredibly interesting conversation. We have some amazing panelists lined up for that, so please be sure to sign up for that, and maybe we'll get some more of those questions answered. Again, if you'd like any more information about what we're doing, please visit us at Verizon5Glabs.com. Thank you again, everyone, for participating. This has been so much fun. I can't wait to do it again.
And Joshua,
Thank
sorry,
you.
because some of the question we're asking, if you guys want to develop, you can go to developer.mimic.com and you can download Edge Engine and Edge SDK and start development of your hybrid Edge Cloud native application development. And we're partner of IBM as well, integrated with Open Horizon and all. So we're happy to answer any questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you so much, Valerie, Joshua, and Indra. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. This was fun. I really appreciated the time together.
Thanks,
Bye.
Joshua.
Bye.
Thanks, and Valerie.
Have a good afternoon.